Like many cities around the country, Bellingham faces the challenges of homelessness. Joining us today to talk about the city's response to homeless encampments are Bellingham Police Chief Dahl and Encampment Cleanup Coordinator Claudia Vizcarra. Thank you for joining us both today on Bellingham Voices.
You're welcome. It's great to be here.
Now let's get to know you two first a little bit. Chief Dahl, how long have you been with the Bellingham Police Department?
Well, I started when I was a student at Seaholm High School in 1979.
Wow.
When I became an Explorer Cadet with the Bellingham Police Department. And then when I graduated and was a student at Western and turned 21, that's when I got hired. So I've been a commissioned officer with the city of Bellingham for 35 years.
What does that mean, a commissioned officer?
Well, I got hired in 1984 as a police officer, got
Okay.
sent off to the academy, and have worked as a police officer in the city of Bellingham. This is my 35th year of that, and have had the opportunity, really the honor and privilege of doing a lot of different things in the police department throughout that time.
And how long have you been chief?
This December will be 2 years for me.
Okay, wonderful. Claudia, tell us about your experience in the Bellingham Police Department.
Yes, thank you. I have been working at the Bellingham Police Department since January 2011.
Okay.
And then I moved to Neighborhood Code Compliance Officer in 2013, and as officially the Encampment Cleanup Coordinator since 2017.
Okay. Claudia, what got you interested in doing this line of work?
You know, I will let you know a little bit about myself. My family moved up here from Los Angeles in 1992. And we were living in a neighborhood right between Broadway and Main Street. So the buildings were catching on fire, and a lot of violence was taking place. So Mom said, we're leaving. So I also I moved up here from another location. I'm not a local Bellinghamster. I wasn't born here. I was born in Los Angeles, but I came up here, and our goal was also to go to Canada, and we didn't make it up there. So I'm one of the people that landed here and stayed here. And I think it has been very helpful for me to connect with people, because when we moved up here, since it wasn't part of the plan, we didn't have a place to stay. And so we occupied a vehicle as well. And Mom made sure that we didn't tell anybody, because of course this is not something to be proud about. Mm-hmm. And we had 2 parks that we visited, and we bounced back and forth while my mom found a job, and we were to not leave any trace behind that we had been there. And then my brother found a friend in downtown who had a little trailer, and they let us, no, that was after that, but before that we found the Agape House.
Okay.
So we lived at the Agape House with my mom and my sisters. My brother and my stepfather had to stay in the vehicle still until he met this friend. Uh-huh. And so I know that we can have, sometimes you don't plan on this to happen.
Sure.
I know that Mom would have never thought that her children would be in the situation. Nobody wants that, on purpose. And she made sure to work very hard, and we went blueberry picking. She had all 7 of us out there blueberry picking. And then she got a job at the seafood plant, and we got a little trailer in Ferndale, and then she was able to afford another trailer, and so we're too big for the small trailer that we had. And so it's always touched my heart to serve in any capacity, because my mom has always been a serving person. And I told myself I want to serve in any way. This is a challenging job, but I feel very humbled at the opportunity to serve. And I can connect with people because it wasn't easy for us. But with very little, we were very happy. And I know that it's really just the way life plays out. So I'm able to connect with people, and I know that it's hard because you can remember those moments, but it's also a way of saying there's a way up and out. Yeah. If you really try, you can make it. And if I had any message for anybody who's unsheltered, is a lot of them tell me, I've lost my children, there's nothing worth it. And I always tell them, but what about you? Yeah. You're worth fighting for. Perhaps you lost everything, but why don't you give yourself the opportunity, right? I think that they deserve it. human beings were just so cute, so beautiful, and we should have that opportunity. And so I try to tell, I put myself in my mom's shoes and see how she felt. And I'm sure somebody lifted her up along the way and said, you can do it. You're going to be able to get out of this, and you'll be able to have these doors open, but you just have to keep pushing. And so I'm very humbled at the opportunity that I get to work here, because again, I can connect with the people that I contact, and I think we feed off of each other. I think people can tell me things and I can tell them things, and it just helps us grow in the situation that everybody's living in. So that's how I ended up here.
All right, so let's get a feel of the scope of homelessness in Bellingham. Chief Dahl, can you speak to that?
Well, it certainly has increased through my 35 years here. I think that when we look at the point-in-time counts, which are done throughout Whatcom County, as an example, last year I believe they identified around 815 people who were experiencing homelessness throughout Whatcom County. I understand that the point-in-time count that was done this January, that number has gone down a little bit in the 700s, but that's still a lot of people. A lot of people who are our friends, our neighbors, seniors, vets, and folks who are traveling throughout the country and spend time in Bellingham.
Mm-hmm. Is this problem? I mean, we hear about it all over the country, even Vancouver, parts of Canada. What is unique about our homelessness challenge in Bellingham?
Well, it's nationwide, and I think that we're facing similar issues that many cities are, especially on the West Coast. I think what makes it a little bit more difficult for us is we do get some people that get bounced back from the border who can't make it through because they don't have the necessary documentation to do that, so they end up coming back here into this area. But I think that like many communities throughout the United States, we see an uptick in people who are experiencing homelessness. I was thinking about 35 years ago when I was a patrol officer, and it was almost like I knew who was in our community, and there were only a certain number of people that we knew were transient of nature or would be in encampments. Now it's just there are just so many that it's hard to know everybody.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's talk about the Encampment Cleanup Program. Claudia, what do you do as the Encampment Cleanup Coordinator? Sounds like a big job.
It's a busy job. Yes. I am in charge of receiving complaints, so we are complaint driven, and so I am in charge of our response to encampment complaints. That could be an encampment or an inhabited vehicle, and so I'm in charge of triaging that, assessing it, and seeing where it's going to fall in our priority list, because we have a backlog. It's an extensive list. And so I have to prioritize that, safety concerns, environmental concerns, and then also the amount of calls we're receiving, because some complaints generate lots of calls. And so triaging it from those measures and seeing where is it going to lie on our priority list for the cleanups. Then I schedule the cleanups, which are done weekly, once a week. And we outsource them, so biomanagement, Northwest cleans up. What happens during that time that we receive the complaint, from the complaint time to the cleanup time, there's outreach done. And so when people report their complaints, we're working collaboratively with the homeless outreach team. And on my first contact, I'm also engaging with the people in the camps, and also in case, because there are new people that we encounter all the time, they perhaps don't know where a shelter is at or where resources, so we point them towards that direction as well. And then the homeless outreach team has that opportunity to connect the people in the camps with the resources that are available. And so that's what's happening in the interim while we're planning the cleanup. And then we will clean up on those priorities and continue moving along the list as complaints are received.
So there's a lot to dissect there. I think the first point is that this whole program is complaint driven.
It is complaint
Let's
driven.
talk about that a little bit, because I think that might be a misconception that a lot of people have, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So how do you get the complaints? How do you measure if something is really, someone just complained, when do you prioritize? How do you prioritize the complaints?
Sure. So the complaints can be received phone calls, emails, our online system, and so they're coming in through different avenues.
Okay.
And then it'll, again, that safety piece, we want to make sure that if somebody's concerned about needles, people will immediately become concerned when they see needles because they don't want their dogs or their kids or somebody to step on them.
Sure.
And so when there are needles, we definitely want to prioritize, or the amount of garbage out there, especially if it's next to the creek, and our creek corridors are very popular. And so we want to prioritize those for the environmental reasons, erosion control, human waste, and syringes making it into the water. We want to prevent that from happening. And so those are the decisions that we're factoring in as to what's going to be priority. But definitely, if people are seeing, sometimes people who have hatchets or knives out there, people are not familiar with that person, and they see this, they're threatened and they're scared.
Sure.
And so we respond based upon those concerns.
Okay. So you go out personally to these camps. So say you get complaints, numerous complaints, there's needles. You personally go out and check out the site, right?
Yes. So I go out with 2 officers, and we will go out there to give notification, right, and to assess the site. Based upon that, we'll be able to decide where on that list it's gonna land, when it's going to be cleaned up. So yes, we do go make contact at that camp if there's somebody there. If not, notification is left behind, but we do go.
And explain, if no one is there, I mean, you make sure that you're communicating with them, whoever is living in this camp.
Yes.
You put notices on tents and that type of thing, right?
Yes, I have bright notices so they will not blend in with the rest of the property that's there. So I usually leave them at the entrances because I don't want to leave it where they're going to miss it out.
Sure.
Because I want to give them the opportunity to gather their belongings, to have a plan in place, and it's usually with a few days in advance notice. So that'll give them the opportunity to gather their belongings, and in a good area where they can see it is always where I leave it behind.
Because the goal isn't necessarily the goal is to have them move.
Yes.
But you really are, I think the key here is also the homeless outreach team. They're brought in at that point too, right?
Yes.
Is that right? Let's talk about that. This is a team that is from the Opportunity Council, is that correct?
Yes.
And the city finances this team, is that correct?
They assist with funding.
Okay. And so they come in and they talk to these people. And what kind of services do they offer them?
I think what happens is that they do assessments and they do intake forms, and set up appointments so that they can get on the housing list. And based upon their scores on their assessment, they are put on the list. After that, they're the ones that handle that portion of it.
Right. Okay, so you go in, you give them how much notice?
Usually 5 days.
Okay. You have to at least give them a certain amount of notice, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and then 5 days later, you go back, and I think this is an interesting part that you personally, you take it on yourself to go through and kind of get the valuable and personal items. So you feel responsible,
right?
In a way for that, right?
Yes, because I'm in charge of walking in the crew to the sites because the company doesn't know where the sites are at. I do, and so I walk them in. We clear the sites, make sure that nobody's there if they've taken their belongings, and I make sure that there are no personal valuables left behind because those I impound, so the person will have the opportunity to retrieve them. So I do go in and the tent's there, check if there are any valuables inside the tent, a backpack, clothing that is neatly, you know when somebody has left something behind. So I will take those items and impound them at the police department. And
then once you clear the item, the site of some personal valuable items, then the bio crew comes in, is that correct?
Right,
and
Bio Management Northwest comes in and cleans up.
And they're contracted with the city to do this, yeah, okay. I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second because there's people who are saying, why do we need to do this? Can't we just leave them alone? Why? I mean, Chief Dahl?
Well, I think that's a good question to ask, and a lot of people have been talking about the latest episode that came out with Como News called Seattle is Dying, and I know I've gotten a lot of questions about that. I want to back up for just a second and just let's do a little bit of reality check here, okay? When I started, we didn't have a full-time position in our department that was a camp cleanup coordinator. Claudia does this every day, and she provides such an incredible human element to it. Because each one of these people that we contact out there in tents or on the street or in cars, each one of them has a story. And the stories are pretty unique, pretty intense they can be. Yes. So our philosophy of outreach and enforcement is critically important here because we want people to be helped. And there are folks out here in our community that just refuse services. I know of people that live in the woods in our community and have done so for many, many years and have had absolutely no impact on other people. We have people living in the woods, living in the street, all of my career. When I was in high school, I know of an individual who is near the waterfront, and he's still there today, but he has no impact to the community. So outreach and enforcement is an important philosophy for us to have, ensuring that we see that human element. And the criticism that we get is, aren't you just displacing it? Aren't you just moving them to someplace else? And the answer is, absolutely we are, to a place where there's no impact. That's the key here. The majority of folks that are experiencing homelessness in Whatcom County are hooked into services and are getting services. And there are some that aren't. There are some that refuse services. There are some that are what we would call transient criminals. These are folks that are out creating a huge, significant impacts to our community. Those are the folks that we're dealing with in the enforcement end of it. If we don't engage in enforcement and outreach, then we're going to have a problem. Then huge and very illegal camps start building up, causing problems for safety for our neighborhoods and causing environmental concerns as well. It's an ongoing thing, and we have to keep up with it. And I think that Claudia and her team just do an amazing job. All of our police officers are out there helping people. We're helping them, doing the best we can. We've purchased food and clothing and batteries to get their cars going, getting services moving along for them. We never, ever want to lose that human element to this. Because these are folks, these are our community members too, just like you and I, right? Mm-hmm. So we want to make sure that we treat everyone with dignity and respect, give them the things that they need, and help them. There's some incredible success stories that we've seen throughout our communities. I've dealt with people who have been problematic for us, 911 calls, violence, they've been victimized. They've been helped. They're living on their own in apartments, getting jobs, living a full and productive life in our community. That's the goal here, I think, for all of them. And so, yeah, it is important that we do this. If we didn't, then the problem, I think, would just increase and get worse. Mm-hmm. But the key is these are folks that deserve to be treated with dignity and respect.
Yeah. And I think it's worth mentioning again that this is a response program. This is a program that is complaint driven.
It is, and we get criticized at times of doing sweeps. We do not do sweeps.
No sweeps.
We respond to complaints.
So other than the safety concerns with these complaints and needles and that type of thing, there's also something I didn't really think about is the whole environmental impact of that. Can you speak to that? Like what happens with these when these camps are set up and
yeah, on some of our sensitive woodland areas, especially those that are near creeks, we see human waste going into those waterways and garbage. Certainly some of the encampment pictures that I've seen that Claudia has shared with me, and she can speak directly to this, have had significant impact to the environment.
Absolutely. Trees cut down next to the creek, which impacts, and also erosion control. So the restoration team is constantly working on the creek corridor because it helps the water quality, but erosion control is deeply impacted in those sensitive areas.
How many camps are you working on in any given time? Can you give us some stats on that?
Our list is, it's an ongoing list. The numbers are fluid, but right now there are about 98 on the list. Again, we're responding to complaints. It's far greater than what we can do at one time, but on average about 10 to 12 camps weekly.
And the average camp houses how many people? Does it fluctuate?
That fluctuates,
Yeah.
yes. 2, or depends on where it's at. It could be up to 8 people, with a couple of tents. So yes, it does fluctuate.
Have you seen any? You mentioned success stories, Chief Dahl. Can you give us one? Can you talk about a particular event where a homeless person found an alternative to the way they were living?
Yes, I can tell you a recent one. I've had a couple, but recently, a lady who was camping, I was contacting quite often. She generates lots of garbage. Just not a nice lady. She's going through a hard time, and she had a meltdown out there, and I felt so bad for her. And I said, I don't have anything other than a hug, and what can I get? How can I help you? And we had a good conversation. And I just recently saw her a couple Wednesdays ago. It was on a Wednesday. And on North Garden, and I said, stop to my coworker, stop. I want to talk to her and see how she's doing. I haven't seen her in a while, which I was surprised because I was frequently contacting her. And she said, Claudia, you saw me have that meltdown. I've been ready for a change. I just haven't been able to push myself, and I'm there. I've finally, this actually just touched my heart because she said, I've had this option available to me, and I just kept on saying no to it. But I was tired of it. It was so encouraging that you just gave me a hug and gave me some uplifting words, and I needed that. And I was really feeling down. She was in a relationship that was very toxic, and she decided to go to a shelter where she's welcome, and she's been welcome the whole time. But she went in, and it's amazing when people say, yes, I'm ready for this. Her face has changed. I told you, I kept on telling her, you look so beautiful. You just look so beautiful. And she's like, thanks. She's just shy, but you can see that the change, the environmental change, how it has just already improved her quality of life. And so that, for me, that was a success story because I see that I've had these contacts. Oh, yes, it's me again. I'm sorry. I know I'm not following you. I'm sorry, but all of this garbage has been reported. It's right next to the creek. She knew. She'd always say, I know, Claudia. I know. I've been trying to clean up, but it's always the same story. It would always be the same story. But seeing her up there on North Garden just touched my heart, and I was so happy to see her. And they're just really, that was the moment. It's sometimes very overwhelming, but seeing something like that, I had a meltdown in the evening because it touched my heart. It's nice to see somebody say, I don't want this to be my permanent place to be in. Yeah. I can live in a better environment, and that, for me, that's a success story because somebody's not out in the elements where it's hard to survive and people are stealing your stuff. And she had earlier in the year, her backpack was stolen from her campsite, and so it's been a lot of things that were happening out there, and she just reached that breaking point. I'm ready to go indoors, and she started her relationship with her father. She said she was starting her relationship with her daughters, which I think that's just beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel being an instrument of that? Oh,
I felt so privileged, so blessed. I'm serious. I went home and told my family. I cried. I can't help but it just makes me emotional because it's hard. It's a hard job. But to see somebody in there, I was like, wow, I did something good. I didn't do anything right, but we're just a piece of the puzzle. But just to know that I was able to hug her, and that she shares with me those times that I've contacted her. I know a lot about her because she's told me so much about her, and I was moved, just really privileged to know about it.
That's a great story and shows the human side, and which we're so proud to have you in our organization because you have that important human touch. Not everybody who's experiencing homelessness has mental health or drug addictions, but a lot of the people that we deal with on a 911 call basis or a disorderly basis in our city center are folks that are suffering from addiction and mental health issues. And so working towards getting somebody into treatment, getting someone to take their medications. We have a intensive case manager in our organization that has a clientele list of about 20 folks of our high utilizers that's working towards keeping people on their medications so that they can function in our community. This month we're going to begin our behavioral health officer That is a commissioned police officer that will work with Claudia, our intensive case manager, the community paramedic, and help to identify folks that are creating a great impact. Again, it's call-driven, it's an impact on our community, and help to move them to a better place, to become functioning members of our community and not being a 911 drain on us.
Right. Something you mentioned too, Claudia, you said that they're in these camps, they don't feel safe. I mean, a lot of times I think we look at these encampments like, oh, that's a scary place. These people are stealing things from neighborhoods and stuff, but they're not safe either, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's absolutely right. I've many people that I've contacted that have you seen they ask me, they'll give me the description of their backpack. If you see it at another camp, could you please let me know?
Oh, wow.
Yes, that does happen a lot.
Yeah. So the encampment cleanup program, is that just public lands, or how does this work?
We actually have encampments that are located on private property, and this is also a misconception because people think that we are out there to look for camps on private property, and we're not allowed to do that. Usually those are brought to our attention because there are fires happening in wooded areas. So there are large parcels in the city that have lots of woods, and fires, people's aggression have impacted residents, and so then they start to call, I'm not feeling safe. People are running through my property fighting. People have hatchets. And in fact, I'm dealing with one currently that has generated so many complaints that has become a priority. So what happens in that situation is that the property owners have submitted a trespass authorization letter. And unfortunately, they are responsible for paying for the cleanup, and that can be very pricey. So we always invite them to be present on their property. Please get involved with your property so it will not get out of control, because these bids could go up very high.
Right.
The cleanups costs are high.
Right.
And so after we receive complaints, we contact the property owner and say there are some violations, especially when the garbage is, it's massive in these sites. These sites are not our typical, these are massive sites. And so we get the property owner involved because they have to be present and they have to take action. And of course, none of that happens without outreach being done.
Right.
So when a property owner says, I'm going to clean up my property, outreach is part of that process from the beginning.
Yeah.
And then we give time for the people who are well-established. These are well-established camps. Then we give notification, and it's not usually 5 days, it's more, because these are bigger camps, and we want to give people the opportunity to gather as much stuff. We do not clean up on private property.
Okay.
And so that is up to the property owner to handle however they're going to handle it. That's not our responsibility, but we do support in trespassing. And again, the enforcement is going to be a last piece of that puzzle, but it will happen if need be upon the property owner's request.
And enforcement is a very, very important element, and it requires the support of our elected officials. And I'm very thankful that Mayor Kelly and our council are supportive of the fact that there's a time when we may have to engage in enforcement. There's a time when we may have to clean up that campsite or arrest someone for trespassing, tow a vehicle, because it has created so much of an impact on other people, and the folks have refused any kind of outreach that it gets to that point. But it requires that support, and I'm thankful for that support, not only from our elected officials, but for our community as well.
Okay. Wow. So you guys are really impressive. Okay.
You know why? Do you know why? Because of Claudia. And I think that when you have somebody who is dealing with such a sensitive subject from the heart, I do believe that Claudia truly cares for every individual that she touches out there. And one of the things that we learn is that a lot of times people who are unsheltered or experiencing homelessness, their relationships are gone. And I think that, when you hear about reaching out and hugging someone, you begin to form those relationships and empower them to get those relationships. Like the story you told about the woman that then began to build relationships with her family again, and that's the desired end result. They're back with their families, they're back with their relationships, and becoming productive members of our community. It's a wow, because That's a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
And that's what Claudia has dedicated herself to. From her life experience, she knows that there is a way up.
Right.
And that's just amazing.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you for what you do. One more final question. I know a lot of us just like, what can we do? What can we do to help this challenge?
Well, I know what you can do and what you can't do.
Okay.
Okay? What I'd ask you not to do.
Okay.
What you can do is support the social service organizations that are helping us with that outreach portion, right? And there are many in town that you could choose and give them your money. I would ask our community not to give money to folks who are panhandling. These are folks that you see on the roadways with signs. There are so many agencies out there that can help individuals. My fear is that the money that they're getting is going to drugs and alcohol. And it's hard. It's hard when you roll up to somebody and they're looking at you and you're in your car and you're trying to be invisible. I don't see you, you don't see me. It's hard to do that, but I would say, think of it in this perspective. The money you give them might be the money that's going to buy them that last drug or alcohol that might be deadly for them. So don't give someone their last and final hit. Give it to a social service agency that can help to build people up. It's hard to do, but I think it's so important, and that's something that all of our community members can take an active role in.
Thank you so much for that advice.
Giving responsibly is very important. I'm thinking in all elements. Since I deal with encampments, tents, sleeping bags, I've been taught that gratitude goes a long way with how you take care of something. And I've walked up to so many camps and I've given them, okay, I gave you your 5 days and you're still here. I'll give you 15 more minutes. You want to gather your tent? And I'm shocked when people say, no, I'm not going to take it. And then I'm like, but why? Because I can get one. I can get another one. And that blows me away because, again, I'm a giver. And when I know that I give so much heart in it. And so sometimes we don't know how we're giving and where it's landing. And it's important to see that there's different places that you can give that will help that root cause. And sometimes people feel good by giving a sleeping bag, and which is helpful, definitely helpful. But if you're giving and if it's the same person over and over and over again, the people are just walking away from things that have been gifted to them. And that's hard because then we come with the crew and dispose of it. And I think of, wow, somebody gave so generously with so much love, and here we are loading it into the truck to get disposed of. And so I think that it's very important that people who give really evaluate where they're giving, and is it really helping, or is it just is it ineffective? Because I've talked to different organizations, and I just say, just evaluate how you're handling this, because if you give, and you have no checks on how much you're giving to a person, then they will walk away from something like that. And tents are expensive. And when you have all of these tents and somebody has 3 tents set up and they will walk away from all of them, I think that we're not giving correctly because they can easily gain access to another one or close. And again, how we can give is those organizations that are helping with showers, helping with laundry, things that are necessities. That's where you really want to give, where it's going to meet the essentials to keep a human alive. That's where I think would be good. For people also to not be scared to report. People just assume that we know about it, and then they're like, why hasn't this been taken care of? And don't be afraid to report it. And then we will take care of it. Even if it's a welfare check, this person's sleeping here and I'm concerned, that's a legitimate call.
Right, and it's important to reiterate that reporting it is helping, right? We're not, it's not like you're doing something bad when you report something like that. It's a chance to get these people into the system, right?
Especially when you know our philosophy of outreach and enforcement.
Yes.
And you know that our first step is always helping, and our first step is always getting an individual into services. That it's not to go out and be heavy-handed ever.
Wow. Well, I can only imagine what a difficult job this is. Claudia, thank you for what you're doing. Chief Dahl, thank you for your your concern in this area as well for our city. And thank you for being here today to shed some light on a really, really difficult subject. Thank you very much. Claudia Vizcarra and Chief Dahl from the Bellingham Police Department. We'll be back next time on Bellingham Voices.